Well, boys and girls, last week we looked at how God told about Jesus being born hundreds of years before it actually happened. And we talked about how every detail was correct, even though it was told about so long before. And one thing that was told in advance was that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. But Mary and Joseph lived a long, long way from Bethlehem in a place called Galilee. And under normal circumstances, Joseph and Mary would have no reason to go to Bethlehem. But if the prophecy that God had made hundreds of years before was to come true, then the question is, how were they going to end up in Bethlehem? Now, let me read from the Bible about what is said. It's in Luke chapter 2, verses 1 to 8. It says, "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken in the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for them." This tells us that the emperor, or king, if you like, called for a census of the Roman world, where everyone had to go to their hometown to be counted. A census is where everyone in the country gets counted to see how many they are, or many there are. And back then, this was something that was very difficult to do. Let me just illustrate a little bit about how hard it can be. I wonder, how many people live in your house? Now, I would suggest that you pause the video just for a moment and count them. Count how many people live in your house. Okay, let's make it a little bit more difficult. This time, I want you to include your grannies and grandads, your uncles and aunts, your cousins, as well as yourselves. Now, pause again and count how many there are in your family. Now, depending on the size of your family, for some that may have been easier than others to do. But you really had to think, who's in my family? Imagine how hard it must have been to try and count the number of people in the whole country. And that's what the emperor had decided to try and do. But he decided to make it easier, you had to travel to the town that you were born in to register and be counted. So Joseph and Mary had to go all the way to his hometown in Bethlehem so that they could be counted as part of that census. And when he was there, baby Jesus was born. God had worked out how all this would happen long in advance, when he said what was going to happen. And so it happened exactly as God said. And it proved that God was in control. And you know, boys and girls, it's the same God that we're talking about today. He hasn't changed. He knows about each one of us. He knows everything about us. And he even knows what's going to happen to us in the future. And so if we trust him and ask him into our lives, he will help us to follow his plan that is the very best for us. And I hope you will ask him into your life and ask him to forgive you for all the wrong things that you've done, and then ask him to help you to follow his plan, because we know it is best. We're going to sing your hymn now, or your carol now, called Joy to the World.